Hi, I'm Jeremy Collins. We're running this. If it screws up, it's all our fault. Don't worry about it. Are y'all with the school, the day school? There are no C's. There are no he loved the recruiting season. Hopefully it didn't knock you to get placed. Great. Well, thank you guys for being here. Pleasure to meet you all.
So can you put the slideshow up streaming rather than just a while?
Thing 1, 2, are you doing audio? I feel real honored to get all this first-rate documentary service. Television was in its heyday as I was going through the journalism school here in the late 60s. Newspapers were doing great reporting.
I'm sure this will be a wonderful production.
I don't know basics, so I have the go live button. That's all the rest. Actually, Grace here.
Oh, I didn't see her. Is that her red hair?
Yes.
Okay.
Annie?
What is Annie? Yes. Carbondale. No, okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
She likes it because
Yeah. Well, it's a good school.
I know. It's good to see you. I wouldn't miss it. It's good to see you. How are things?
you're one of the few people that
I haven't seen you in forever. I know.
All right.
We
We'll be
got
stuck in the corner.
commentators going on here?
Oh, no way. How wonderful. I'm sorry I had to hear that. That he did.
Kate handing me that.
Take his hand in the mouth.
She did a good job. And then it was Jeremy's stuff.
That's how they roll. We get the hype.
I know.
This is
Set
where
up the end of it.
Thing 1, 2, are you doing audio? Television was in its heyday as I was going. I feel real honored to get all this first-rate documentary service. Television was in its heyday as I was going through the journalism school here in the late 60s. Newspapers were doing great reporting, but these correspondents in Vietnam and these correspondents on the front lines of the civil rights movement around the country, they were just so compelling. They were cool, they were collected, they went into obviously these terrible situations, reported the news, got the interviews with cameramen who were getting terrific stories from the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. That was too compelling for me. I can remember going home to my mentor, my father, and saying, I've decided not to do newspapering, I'm going to do TV. And he went in the kitchen and mixed himself another drink. Well, I burned out on television news when I was down in New Orleans, and television news had burned out on me. It wasn't working very well for either of us, and it was a good time to leave, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I was writing a nationally syndicated newspaper column in about 70 newspapers around the country that I had inherited from my father. And that was a good base, and I thought, well, you know, I got to have something else, and I got to have a place. And a student from here told the faculty that she had interned at my television station in New Orleans, and that they ought to consider hiring Kent Collins to teach classes. So I came up here, took a 50% pay cut, and signed on with the School of Journalism for 35 years, 10 years of which I was on adjunct status while I did some additional freelance and entrepreneurial things. But 35 years here at Missouri was by far the best journalism I ever did. I think if there was any exercise that was most fun for me, it was at KOMU in the Tiger Chair, our version of a copy desk at KOMU, where students would bring up their stories before they were allowed to edit at the computer. They would bring up their scripts and to rework sentences, particularly lead sentences, to have impact, to connect with the audience, to talk about the central compelling characters. That was exciting. That was fun. Shortly after I got here, I ran into what is really, truly my favorite quote from Bliss, and I had it printed out and posted it in a frame outside my office, hoping some student would look at it. In broadcast news, the challenge is greatest. Nowhere is clarity in writing so necessary, nowhere the clock so tyrannical, nowhere the audience and the responsibility so great. In your hands has been placed the greatest invention, not the satellite truck or the computer, but the word. Wow, that still sets me off. The students were always invigorating. The best students were wildly invigorating, and the average students were still invigorating to some degree. And I think I stayed a little bit younger, and maybe not so much of a curmudgeon, dealing with 22-year-olds, their questions, their ideas, their fantasies, their creativity, and I miss that.
Everybody here knows Kent, and we know that he wanted us to think after we met with him. So if you're a former student now, you're thinking, did he think I was a best student? I'm Stacy Wolfel. I'm a retired professor from the School of Journalism. I'm honored the family asked me to act as MC here today. I want to welcome everybody who's here. We have a live stream that's going that people can tune in and watch as well. I had so many people reach out and say, I wish I could come, but they had unavoidable conflicts and couldn't be here. But so happy to see a full room and happy to have people on the stream. We want it to be a happy day. Obviously, there's some tears that are natural for all of this, but you already laughed some of the video, and I think we'll have some other laughs as we go through. I'll talk briefly. My job is not to speak very long, but I'll talk briefly about my time with Kent. We worked together for 32 years. I just said no tears, but I will do had a great time doing that. He was my boss much of that time. First as the news director at KOMU, he was the news director before I took over out there. And then for 18 years, I think it was, as the chair of the radio TV department. And so we had a great relationship. We loved to talk. We didn't always get along about everything. Kent's biggest complaint was that I would do things and I wouldn't fill him in. You know, I would do some things and not fill him in. And he was right about that. I did that on purpose. But we usually came around together on that. Watching Kent work all those years, and all of you I know witnessed it too, his interest was always in helping other people. It was never about him. It was never about himself. And I can remember on one of those disagreements we had, we started a 9 p.m. news at KOMU a number of years ago because we had an alternative channel we could do that on. And Kent was irritated that it was planned without him being involved all along, but his real concern was that wasn't about his ego or anything like that. His real concern was, would this be good for the students? It's fun, KOMU had a reason to do it for revenue and some other things like that, but would it be good for the students? And we had a long talk about it. I thought it would be good for the students. Ultimately, I think it was, but he just wanted to make sure, and that's why he didn't want to be left out ever when it came to things like that. In terms of helping you, those of you who were his student know that he was there for you. He was there for me too. He was largely responsible for me becoming news director at KOMU. He made me the assistant news director. I think it was a title we didn't have there before. And he was news director just for 2 years. That was his second time around. He had been news director earlier in the 80s, and this was from 88 to 90. I made the same joke for 36 years, saying that he was the Grover Cleveland of KOMU. With 2 non-consecutive terms, if you're willing to look that up there. And generous person that he was, he would laugh every time I said it, even though we heard it so many times. But he was responsible for that. He was responsible for my move over to the documentary center. Really lobbied Dean Mills at the time to do that, and my promotion to professor as well. He was a guy that loved traveling the world to talk about journalism, and we got to do that together sometimes. I'm going to read a email that I got from him. Look, that's on it. Back in, one of the places we traveled separately, been to was Croatia. We hosted Croatian journalists here. And I got an email on March 22nd, and he said, his always short, sharp sentences from Kent. He said, 8 years ago, I was in Croatia and Slovenia teaching and eating. The eating is very good there, if you have been. Are you in Croatia today? What are you teaching? How long are you there for? Kent. So I replied, not so short and sharp. I sent him an email back saying what I was doing. And he said, wow. When he replied, wow, I'm envious. Good for Croatian journalists that you were there. You are our best teacher. And I will say, Kent was an honest guy, but he was lying then because he was right. He was and is our best teacher. And all of you since that time. Hopefully you picked up a program. We've got a number of people who will speak, and there'll be a chance at the end for some of you to share memories as well. So let me bring up Dean David Kurpius. He's over here now. And let him say a few words as well. For those of you who come up, we have handheld mics.
Thank you. Yep, that worked. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I think, like all of us in the room, we all have a Kent Collins story. And my story starts 2 months before I became dean, almost 8 years ago, seven years ago. And I had come to town with my family they're like, where are we going? And so thought probably should show them the place. And I came out, I was alone, I came out of Neff Hall, the big famous wooden doors, and had gone over by the archway where Kent's new bench is, kind of in that vicinity. And I was just kind of looking around, admiring it, taking a minute. And Kent comes out those doors. And told anybody I was there. And I hear this booming broadcaster voice. Dean Kirpius, is that you? And he comes over, and for 20 minutes, he explains to me how important this place is. And welcomed me in a way that nobody else had had a chance. But he did it warmly, and he was first. And he ended that conversation by saying, you know, looking around at the arch and the schoolmaster of the world statement and everything, he said, this is the Church of Journalism. That's a good way to welcome a new dean. So what I saw in Kent was that he is a person who cares deeply about journalism, and he spent a lot of time in my office making sure that I did things the way he thought they should be done. I did not always follow that. And he started his advocating with students first. Is this good for students? Faculty were second, because he cared deeply about the faculty and the instruction and the quality of the work that we did. And he had a way about him that even if I disagreed with him, we could have a good conversation. And he would make sure that he left with his final note being known. But he was really good to work with, and I loved those meetings with him. He regularly reminded me that our role is not just on this campus. That our role, we were training journalists who would be out across the world, and that they would be the leaders, and we had to do it best. Our writing had to be great, our ethics had to be top-notch. We had to do it the best because we were leading the industry. He was right. He pushed for that in a way that is amazing. And so as I look around this room, and I met with some of our alums earlier today, Kent was here 35 years. He touched thousands of students. He touched hundreds, maybe thousands of journalists doing his consulting and his industry connections. Kent was a person who was connected across the world. Everybody knew Kent Collins, and they knew his quality of work. We will miss what he did in terms of those connections. And we will cherish what he did in terms of those connections, because you all come back and you make sure that this moves forward in the right way. Kent, I didn't realize how much Kent had touched my heart until I got the email that he wrote for when he passed. And I'd read it, and it was heartwarming, but I had a faculty member, a faculty chair, come in my office the next day. So I think I'm good. And I said, well, you didn't get it, I'll read it to you. And halfway through it, I started to cry. I don't have the relationship that Stacy and many of you have with him, but I miss him. And I wish he'd come ambling into my office again to hold me accountable. But the one thing that stays is what he's done for all of us. And we all know this is the church of journalism. And Kent Collins was the Pope.
Back in the mid-'80s, some of you weren't around yet then, some of you were all young people teaching here. I was in my 20s, Kent was in his 30s. There were a number of us who had young families. John Porter was the news director at KLMU, couldn't make the trip, it's probably on the screen here. But we had a faculty anchor who was just terrific on the air at KLMU, and a great leader for the newsroom, really helping students. And she's next on the list. Adrienne Laurent is here. She was a colleague with Kent and then a business partner for a lot of years, and I will turn it over to her.
So, probably like many of you, I clearly remember my first days of knowing Kent Collins. It was about 40 years ago, almost. I had moved from California to Missouri to accept a job at the journalism school, along with my 4-month-old baby at the time. And Kent and Bea graciously invited us over for dinner. And we sat in their family room and shared the first of what would be many meals. And I know that for Kent, I learned a lot about his true nature that night. I learned about his hospitality. I learned about his curiosity. And I learned about what would be repeated with so many other newcomers after me. He had a deep kindness that we were all able to benefit from. I also watched Kent make a prediction that night that actually came true. And the conversation had come around to, well, how long do you think you'll be in Columbia? And I watched Bea, who had been the wife of a TV news person for a long time, and had made all the moves that we all do in that situation. And Kent said, well, I'm here for the long haul. This is it. This is where I'm going to stay. And Bea was quite reasonably skeptical about that. However, Kent was right, and he did want to stay, and he did stay. And I think he probably knew that night that he would spend his final days in Columbia, Missouri. Kent loved this journalism school and all that it stands for, and he loved the students. He had a natural curiosity that made him such a good journalist, and it led him to explore a number of different endeavors that we've all heard about. And I was very fortunate to be his partner in one of those endeavors, and that was in our company, Medialine. With the support of our spouses, we started this business, a company that would help television people find jobs. And so in 1985, we started working on what we thought would be a good idea for the people in our journalism school and the people in the industry to find jobs. Way back then, the way we found jobs was that we would eagerly wait for the weekly delivery of Broadcasting Magazine, and then we'd go to the back pages and we'd see who was hiring. And it was a ridiculously slow process. There could be at least a month between the time a job comes open and the time you could get your tape on the news director's desk. And Kent knew that there had to be a better way. And so Medialine was born. Medialine took job information and delivered it through a telephone line. And we basically took that information and broadcast it instead of waiting for the print version. As we were preparing this company, there was this brand new technology coming up that we got wind of, because you see, Kent and I had planned to put a series of telephone answering machines. You can look that up too if you're a millennial, but a series of telephone answering machines that had job information. People could call into the phone and get the job information. And so then we heard about this brand new technology coming, and it was called voicemail. And so we researched it and in fact embraced it, and we delivered our job information via voicemail. And then a few years later we heard of another new technology, and it was called the internet. And so then we were able to put that job information online, and a few years after that put resume tapes online so that news directors could see news people on their resume tapes. Medialine had a good run for 28 years, and in that time, the four of us grew older, our children became adults, and the world changed. Throughout his well-lived life, though, Kent remained unwaveringly dedicated to his family. He remained hospitable to others, especially the newcomers. He remained curious, and he remained kind, always very kind. And I know that many of you are going to share this knowing with me that we will always have Kent in our hearts. And I am going to work very hard to embody the qualities that made him such a remarkable man.
for folks like Kent, who taught here for the long haul, as Adrian said, he was definitely here for the long haul. He had the good fortune to see some of his former students become his colleagues. And the next person we'll have here, we have a definite California team here. We have another California coming up. Was a student in our newsroom at KOMU, and then in our PhD program. And she got to know Kent through all of that. She was his research assistant in the PhD program. Crucial, I might say, just for my own interest in getting our documentary program started. She did a lot of the key research for that. Then Kelly Stanfield joined us on the faculty and got to work with Kent in a whole new light. She's here to talk a little bit about her experience.
Hi everyone, I am definitely going to cry. So, I met Kent 10 years ago when I moved to Missouri to start our master's program here, and he was hiring students to work as his research assistants on a big RGI project, and I had somehow landed an interview. All I knew about Kent at the time was that he was our department chair, and he had been for decades, and he inexplicably had 2 offices at the School of Journalism. I felt so intimidated walking into that interview with him, but as soon as I met him, that fear immediately melted away. He put his feet up on the desk, he offered me a Tootsie Pop. He took one for himself, and then he asked me about my dreams and how the hell a California girl had ended up there in Missouri. It was an interview that would change my life in measurable ways and in the best ways possible. I had just met my future boss, professor, mentor, and one of my best friends. As Kent's research assistant, I ended up doing a lot of tasks for him and with him that I think were outside of the job description that I was very happy to do. One of them was giving him Facebook lessons. That took up the majority of my time, actually. He had this account, but he didn't quite know how to use it, and he really wanted to know how to use it because he wanted to connect with his former students, his family, his friends, his colleagues. And so the first time we logged into his account together, he had hundreds of friend requests. And I looked at it and I said, okay, Kent, a lot of these are going to be fake. And then I explained to him why people would make fake accounts and bots and all of that. But then I was immediately proven wrong because there were hundreds of friend requests and he knew every single person. Most of them were his former students. And as we went through each friend request and proved them one by one, he remembered everyone. He told me their name and what they had done at KOU and a funny story about something that happened in the newsroom, their current job, and all of their different career stops along the way. Kent loved and cared deeply for his students, and he made sure we all knew it and felt it. His impact here was profound. When I think of Kent, I think of him commanding the KOU newsroom after a newscast, his booming voice telling us to shoot more sequences, be more skeptical, and for the love of God, sex it up a little. After knowing Kent for about a year, I finally confided in him that my dream job was to be a broadcast journalism professor here at the School of Journalism. He didn't laugh, he didn't make fun of me, he didn't tell me all the ways why, or all the reasons why that wouldn't happen. Instead, from that point on, he did everything he could to help me achieve that dream. He somehow talked Stacy into hiring me to be a title chair at KOU. He wrote me letters of recommendation. He hired me to teach Broadcast One, and he went out of his way to introduce me to people in high places. Every opportunity I had in my career was because Kent believed in me, and he convinced other people they should too. When I eventually got my dream job here, I had serious imposter syndrome. I would walk into meetings and with faculty members just feeling totally out of place and like I didn't belong. I would tell that to Kent, what am I doing here? This is so scary. And he would try to calm my nerves, and one day I was doing my usual bits of like, I'm too scared to talk in a meeting.
not have had a seat at some of those tables. He believed in me and it gave me a confidence in myself I never had before. When I think of Kent, I think of him watching me sit timidly in meetings, too afraid and too shy to say my ideas, and him looking at me and finding subtle ways to work me into the conversation without putting me on the spot. Kent and I developed the most precious and wonderful and probably odd friendship. We'd get together for lunch every week and dessert, always dessert, and he'd ask me about the fiction I was reading and then tell me about the nonfiction he was reading. We talked about the excellent dialogue in Gilmore Girls and the latest installment of Frontline. During the pandemic, we'd social distance over coffee and brownies on his back deck with me or over lunch on a park bench. When my partner and I bought a house, he and B came over and they marveled at every little detail, making us feel like we bought the most special house in the history of homes, even though it's just a normal house. He celebrated my happy moments, interrupting a class I was teaching once with flowers and balloons to celebrate me finishing a comprehensive exams. And he supported me through my darkest days, bringing me a bouquet of flowers to my front porch to cheer me up, or leaving me a card of encouragement at my office door to let me know that he was there for me. When I think of Kent, I think of him arranging a meeting with my partner behind my back because he wanted to make sure that I was okay and he wanted to know how he could best support me, but he didn't want to stress me out by asking me himself. I knew Kent in many different roles, but the one he clearly cherished the most was being a husband, father, grandfather, brother, and family man. His family was always on his mind. I saw Kent thousands of times, and each time he'd have an update for me about each of you. I feel like I know you so well because of the stories Kent has told me over the past 10 years, and the pictures and videos he showed me and the updates he'd given me. Even his brothers and his cousin in Mississippi have never met you, but I know so much about you. He loved each of you so much, and thank you for sharing him with us. When I think of Kent, I think of him swiping through the photos and videos of his kids on his phone, his grandkids on his phone, absolutely beaming with pride for each of you. When Kent hired me to work on his RJ project 10 years ago, he told me we were going to have great fun, and we sure did.
Well, as I said, it's special when a former student can join as a colleague, but our next speaker, this might be unique. I don't know if this is happening with any other journalism school faculty, because this is a student, one of Kent's students who joined his family. Lisa Thomas. Come on up.
These were such a special day. So Stacy's right. If you made a Venn diagram, as a good visual journalist would do, all the people that Ken taught and mentored, advised, or coached throughout the years, and then of his extended family, I would be the only person in the overlapping circles. And I'm extremely lucky to have occupied that rarefied space. I married Kent's oldest son, Justin, in 2004. But I first met Ken as one of his students in the late 90s. I came to Mizzou to be the next Kate Corrick. But thanks to Kent and Linda Praxford, who I saw somewhere, Linda, I realized that producing was my calling. My parents had no idea what a producer did. But they felt better about my switch once Ken explained at my graduation dinner that producers tend to rise up the ranks of the newsroom faster and have more longevity. And that's the thing about working in TV news. It's not always an industry that your parents understand. It's strange and hard hours, it's constant deadlines, and staying in town instead of evacuating for hurricanes. And of course, it was all for fantastic pay, right? But it's also a small industry where who you know is important. And thankfully, I knew Kent. And he knew pretty much everyone. I mean, if you look around this room, you'll see his reach in nearly every TV market in the US, even internationally. And his connections helped me open doors. For nearly 15 years, Kent helped me navigate newsroom policy bathroom seat. I'm like, no, I'm not. I would say that. Like, Mr. Shark never thinks that. He knew the lingo and the players. And I think he took special pride in the fact that I ended up working in New Orleans, where he worked from 1982 to 84, just before coming to Mizzou. He said New Orleans was the kind of news town where you could have multiple leads in just one A block. And he was right. It was great fun. It was good. As you said. But I know that I'm far from the only one who benefited from his advice. You did not have to be an in-law to get his thoughts on your career. He advised students long after they left KOU, and he took great pride in their success. He cared deeply about them and the public service they performed. And he let them know he cared. He loved to hear from y'all in good times and bad. You know, their parents or partner may not understand their line of work, but Ken sure did. And that's a valuable thing in this industry, to have a mentor who really gets it. I don't think Ken coined the term Mizzou Mafia, but it's a perfect reflection of how he felt about the J School, an interconnected family that takes care of one another without the horse heads and beds. And Ken loved to say, that's one of ours. I love that. In 2013, Ken helped open another door for me, this time in academia. His connections led me to a teaching position at Loyola University, New Orleans. And once again, he was my guide, this time helping me navigate the politics of higher ed. I have modeled my relationship with my journalism students after the example Ken has set, and I'm proud to say that many of them keep in touch for job advice well after graduation. In recent years, Ken became worried about the future of local TV news. So much so that in the months before he died, he and I, along with his wonderful friend Steve Ackerman, we were working on a research project to help improve recruitment and retention among newsroom employees. And Ken would not want me to pass up a sales pitch in front of a captive audience. So if you're interested, talk to me or Steve or Stacey, whatever. It was really important to him. We talked a lot about it. And it's all, all of his worry and concern is because, as you'll hear often today, that journalism was his religion. His other passion, of course, was family. Family was paramount to Kent. And that included his in-laws. He formed a deep bond with my parents who are here today, and my siblings, and he always asked about my 9 nieces and nephews. He made it clear they were a part of his family, too. I think I increased my standing in the race for Ken's favorite student when Justin and I made him a grandpa. When I was pregnant with Lucy, Ken told me a story about his mother, Beulah Collins. According to family lore, when Bea was pregnant with Justin, her first grandchild, Ken's mother's friend, Cornelia Broadfoot, told her, this is Ken's accent, Beulah, you're about to have a grandchild? Now you can die! Ken told the story often because Ken's favorite job, hands down, was being Papa Collins to Lucy and Katie and Austin and Edie. He delighted, there is no better word than delighted in time with them. He had inside jokes with each of them. He planned excursions with each one based on their interests. He gave them gifts based on their latest obsessions, and they are his best legacy. Ken taught me to be a better journalist, manager, and educator, and I miss his advice every day. But he taught me so much more by example. How to be a loving spouse, how to be a caring sibling and a connected parent, and how to cherish time with loved ones. He called me once on a random Tuesday and left me a voicemail. How he said, this is Kent. Yeah, it's Kent. He called, this is Kent, just to tell me he loved me and to thank me for being a great mom, wife, and daughter-in-law. It's hard to think that I won't hear that voice again. But that voice was on in his grandchildren, and they have a little something to say about their Papa Collins. So Lucy, Katie, and Austin, you're worried. This is a really funny crowd. You're worried. I wouldn't worry. All these people love Bob. What was your favorite part of being with Bob?
My favorite part of
You want to say something? Maybe. You want to say what your favorite part was about being about it and Brady? No. You notice pictures of you pressure washing in the slideshow? That was fun. Yes. What about, which one Papa singing here? Country Road. You sing a little bit of it? Okay. Want to say something? No, it's all right. Lucy has prepared something. Ready? Sure. You want to talk?
Hi. I'm Kent's oldest grandchild. I'm 13. So, I don't really know what I wrote, but, like what a lot of people said. Okay. So what a lot of people I know are gonna say or are thinking is Kent has always like helped people, like helped their voice come through. I was never a student, clearly, but I did learn a lot from him. I learned I wanted to be a teacher from him and my mom. So when this memorial idea was first brought up, I didn't want to be up here. They was gonna cry like I am now, but that's the point. Additionally, I wanted to. I know I'd regret it if I wasn't up here, and however long I would look back and be like, I don't know. So I love my grandfather. I don't really know how I could have grown up without him. I don't really know. When my parents told me, okay, story. I was with my other grandparents Judy and Meyer, her parents, when our parents called us and they were like, Papa passed away last night. Kate and I was expecting it. I don't know how or why, but we didn't know it was going to happen this soon. I know I didn't, at least. It was really, really serious. Like, Mom and Dad were quiet for quite a bit of the call. I know Papa hated when people were quiet or no one was talking. So he would always insert himself in the conversation, crack a joke, or he would just take a nap. So I went up to a room and cried for about 15 minutes until my grandmother came down to have me talk to my parents. My loving parents already hung up at that point. And so I just went into the family. I just had him for crying and putting my dog Oliver, who's a very good listener, even though he doesn't act like it. All I wanted to do in the moment was just like go home, hold this like little weird bird robin thing that no one has decided on what type of bird it is, but it's this glass thing from, I don't remember where, but from Croatia. I don't think so. He went with his brothers and his parents to get it. He was like, he wrote a note, and he was like, this has been in our family for, I think, 50 years? I don't know. And he was, whenever someone's like, my grandfather or my grandmother or whoever left this behind for me, that's what I think about now. And I don't know. All I know is it was a hard day. I didn't really know what to do. I just know I felt really, really guilty because I did fun things that day. I finished a book. I watched a movie that I loved, and in theory, I felt like I had a good day, which I did, but I don't know. And my grandmother told me, that's the point. Papa wouldn't want that. He wouldn't have wanted anyone to be sad for too long. He wanted people to be as happy as they can. And it's true. That's all he wanted. put smiles on people's faces. That's the reason I, probably most of y'all, love about him.
Thank God. I want to bring up Paul Collins and his brothers to speak about their relationship.
Well, I'm glad I'm following that act, so I feel like I can leap freely. I'm going to talk about our childhood a little bit. Ken was 2 when I was born, and so this was the longest relationship of my life. When we were kids, little kids, I'm sure you didn't know Kent was in a gang once. He was in fact a gang leader. The average age being 7 years old. I was the runt of the litter at 5 years old and Kent was 7, and we were one of a gang of 6 kids who were free-ranging around the block. This was before helicopter parenting, clearly. They didn't know what they were. And my mother had made him a jacket, a zip-up jacket with a lightning bolt, a yellow lightning bolt across it, because this was a jacket worn by Captain Video on his eponymous TV show. And he even had the little sailor's cap. And so he was the cool one. He was the coolest one. And my mother never made me a jacket. we know where the pecking order came from. When Todd was born, then it was the 3 boys, everything. The 3 boys, the 3 boys. And my father never got our names straight. So, like a good Southern gentleman, he called us all old fella. And he called all young women honey, and he called all women ladies, and all men mister. He never knew anybody's name. So we were the 3 boys were old fellas. And we did the typical kid stuff together. We, run around the yard yelling and running like boys. And in the winter, Chicago winters, we'd build tunnels underneath the snow in the front yard. Ken and Todd were both baseball nuts, and so they played baseball in the backyard endlessly, and I would be in my room playing Spaceman. So that tells you a little bit more about it. A couple of interesting stories with Kent. And this is, again, when we were very small. He had a tendency when he'd tell a joke. He'd say, "I'm going to tell you a joke." And the title of the joke is, and he'd tell the punchline. He was a guy who couldn't go without leading with a headline. So I think that was a sign of things to come. The other thing I remember, as if it's a video in my head, we used to, on Sunday mornings, when my parents were still asleep, we would come down to the kitchen, get one of those rectangular bricks of chocolate ice cream out of the freezer, put it on the kitchen table, each grab a spoon, and stand around eating. And I remember vividly one time I was saying, "I don't think this is sanitary." And Kent, without even looking up, said, "Shut up and eat." So we know who the boss in this family was. In adolescence, we went our separate ways somewhat. We always do. Adolescence. That's males tend to be in adolescence from about the age of 12 to 35. And so we went our separate ways a little bit. But when Kent was 15, I was 13, and Todd was 11, we left the Chicago suburb. Our dad retired early. We went down to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, another university town that's pretty good. And we went into this foreign territory. We go into the class. Todd was in elementary school, but Kent and I were in the junior high and high school, which was on one campus back then. And we went in, and all the boys wore Carolina powder blue shirts and khakis and matching Carolina blue socks and Weejup loafers. Or sometimes they'd wear pale yellow and khakis and pale yellow socks and, God help us, French Schreiner shoes. But Kent and I were Chicago boys, so we wore white shirts with the cuffs rolled up exactly 2 times, black pants, and pointy black shoes. So this was sartorial suicide, of course. And a teacher, she wasn't the teacher of either of us, but she was a teacher at school, found out that we both played and sang, played guitars and sang, and she picked us up and put us in front of a bunch of school auditorium meetings with the full student body. And we instantly went from being strange strangers to being cool. And, you know, it changed our life. So, I also think that this woman who plucked us out of obscurity and possible constant ridicule had an impression on Kent, and from what I understand, and from the outpouring of his retirement and the outpouring of his demise, of all the little personal ways he took students aside and helped them out. A moment. I actually watched him teach once. I was here visiting, and I sat in on a class, and I was pretty blown away. I mean, there were no lecture notes, completely free reading, a lot of back and forth, really enthusiastic. I said, how come I never had a teacher like this in school? But I also said to myself, how come I didn't know this? When Mom and Dad died, too early and too young, the 3 of us became close again, much closer than we'd ever been. And that's been going on for 40 years now. We used to do, most Sundays we'd do phone calls, sometimes we'd Zoom, but most Sundays we'd do phone calls. And we'd shoot the breeze and talk politics and talk about what was going on in our life, nothing very important. But I'm going to miss those calls. I'm going to miss them. You know, none of us know how much time we have. But you get to an age and a point in life when you know how much time you don't have. Kent had a good life. And he wanted to have a good death. And he did. He didn't want not to be dead. I'm going to miss him. But I'm always going to, he's gone. Now it's we 2, Todd, down to 2 guys. But, you know, he's always going to be there for me and I think for Todd. In here, thank you.
I'm really glad you all got the crying can popped because that's going to continue. I'm Kent's daughter, Summer. So many of you all have talked about my father and how great he was with mentoring people. I'm going to tell you a little secret. He was terrible with names. I can guarantee that I have walked up to many of you from the time I was yay high and extended my name and said, "Hi, I'm Summer, what's your name?" That was not because I am a natural extrovert. That is exactly the opposite. It was because my father, 5 minutes before that, would lean down to me and be like, "I'm not going to remember names. I need you to extend your hand." So if I'd done that was because my dad couldn't remember the name. One of the things that I realized, my father and I went on a series of little trips together. The first one was to Washington, D.C. when I was, I think, about 7. And walking into the St. Louis airport, we went through what then was very minimal security because it was pre-September 11th, and we got close to our gate and he recognized a student. Leaned down, "Hey, that's one of my students. I don't remember the name." I need you to extend your hand. So we did that. We get to our change of planes in Chicago. We see another colleague. Hey, I need you to extend your hand. We get to DC. Hey, I need you to extend your hand. There is not an airport in this world that my father can walk into and not recognize at least one person. This was proved over and over again in his life. And even wandering around the Tower of London, he ran into students everywhere. And that was the importance of relationships to him. Every one of you all is here because you had a relationship with him. And it was important to you, and it was very important to him. So one of the people who was here, who was playing our lovely bagpipes, Paul McNeil, I met for the first time on that trip. Longtime friend of my dad's, and randomly happened to be in town, I believe, happened to be in DC when we were there. Said, hey, let's meet, let's go to the Capitol together. And that was, my father kept in touch with everybody. He found ways to keep in touch with everybody. And going through some of his things, I found out one of the ways that he'd done that. In his briefcase, he kept stamps and envelopes and stationery, and kept a list. When was the last time I'd written to this person? This list is pages and pages and pages long, y'all. And whenever he had a few moments, if he hadn't written to somebody in a while, he'd write a little note and pop it in the mail. Because the relationships mattered to him. The other thing that mattered a lot was adventure. On this trip, it was a work trip, ostensibly. My father probably invented the term work-life integration. He never had the balance down. Everything was integrated. I came to many of y'all's classes when I was about this big, and everything was work, and everything was not work. Everything was enjoyable to him. So on this work trip that he spent probably 3 hours working, and the rest of the weekend was playing around with his daughter, he wanted to make memories. He wanted to have fun. He wanted to be an adventure. So when I, having no idea what the National Mall was or how big it is, wanted to look fancy and wear a pretty flowered dress and very uncomfortable dress shoes, he said, sure, let's do it. When I inevitably, 10 minutes into walking around the National Mall, said, Daddy, my feet hurt, he said, okay, I'll carry you on my shoulders. The point was the adventure. The point was the memory. It wasn't about the fact that he knew, before I even put on the shoes, that I was going to end up on his shoulders partway through. He knew that, and he was okay with that. The point was the memory. And the last thing he did on that trip was he, in getting back to the airport, had the option of, can I rent a taxi, take us to the airport, or do I spend a little bit more and get a limo? I'd never been in a limo. My dad got the limo. It was an expense, I'm sure, but the point was the memory. The point was the adventure. So I hope that you all will remember to connect with people who matter to you, and to do the fun thing, have the adventure, get the limo.
Hello everyone, I'm Justin's baby brother. I think my dad is with us today because he wanted to make this easier for me by having my lecture on Dwight Eisenhower that I need to give in 2 weeks at the World War II Museum in my pocket, and not the notes that I wrote on the airplane. So I don't have any, which is probably for the better. A few things. I don't want to lecture you all, though Ken certainly had ways, so maybe I'm going to channel Ken. Summer talked about travel. I never got in the limo, by the way. And Stacey, that may have been on the university card. Who knows? He loved to travel, and not only travel and meet new people and have the of the culture. He would seek people out. So I think if there's a lesson of Kent, it's go seek people out. Just as importantly, the international students that he would always call the internationals. They were Chinese students, they were Russian students. He and Bee would bring them in, bring people in. As much as Kent would go seek people out, he would want to bring people in. And the number of times that any of us were in his office and students would drop by, not during office hours. I think that's probably all I remember about being on campus. He loved music. My daughter, I don't know if you heard, one thing she remembers about Kent is country roads. I remember driving on the service road with 63 going south to KO, using the Trans Am, and playing, you know, the top 40 hits: Kenny Loggins, Top Gun, Phil Collins, Madonna. That was a bit risque. We loved that. George Michael, which I probably shouldn't have been listening to. You probably shouldn't have been listening to it. But he'd roll down the window, so it was like we were in one of those fighter jets that Maverick was in. Roll down the windows, sing at the top of your lungs. That's what Kent would want to do. All of my mistakes were immediately followed by immediate acknowledgement of love and support. And there was never a doubt in my mind that no matter what I did, no matter what screw up, he was right there. And I think the most important thing of how he could be such a rock for the family is the fact that he had that rock with him for over 50 years. And Mom, find yourself a bee. Find yourself a bee, and that will let you be as wonderful as Kent was. Summer's story about wings. I want to remember the good. I was with him. We were with him. When Kent passed that day, he had his daughter-in-law, Lisa, his 3 children with him. He had his wife, Bee, and he had his brother, Todd. He knew he was loved. Every person that walked into that room, nurse, orderly, social worker, doctor, he wanted to look in the eye, he wanted to look on the name badge, he wanted to know who was helping him. He wanted to make that connection. And that's what Kent is about making connections and just remembering who's helping you. It's not about him helping you all, it's about who is helping him. So thank you for helping my dad, thank you for helping my family through this tough time. Thank you, Mary Lou, Tommy, Margaret, Ronnie, for being here. And thank you, Pops, for being such a great dad.
Thank you very much for everybody. The family, as Jeremy was saying, it's been really, really nice over the last 2 months to hear from people. I think I posted something the morning after he passed away. Probably should have realized that a lot of people would respond, but we were very surprised to see it, and it really was the day after. It was a really good day. Todd took us out for a nice meal at his favorite place on the River Bluffs, and it was, as Lucy was saying, the day they passed away, the day after, it was a pretty good day. Kent would have liked it. So again, thank you very much for everybody for coming. It means a lot from the family. I started writing a eulogy when I came up to see Dad shortly after he was diagnosed, about 6 months ago. And I started going through a bunch of different ideas, and it was perfectly worded. It was run-on sentence after run-on sentence. It was flowery. It was everything that embodied Kent. And it was everything that he would have hated as a news editor. As most of you know, who I went to school with, I'm a wannabe journalist. I wasn't cool enough, I wasn't smart enough to be a real journalist like a lot of you were. I had to go to the dark side of the force of sales and marketing and programming. The last year of my journalism school experience was on the, like I said, dark side of the force. So that was my only experience with Kent was him editing a high school essay of mine. That it was, again, very well worded, very well written, and it was way too long, and he chopped up. Justin, it's too wordy, get to the point. So that was my only experience with Kent as a news editor. So here I am thinking about what to talk about. It can't be wordy, it can't be colorful. And I'm watching this old show on Netflix a couple weeks ago, and there's this scene with an older character and a younger character, older character, 60 or 70 younger character. And he asked the young girl, 12 or 13 years old, do you know what legacy means? She said, no. Legacy, it's what remains of you when you're gone. It's what you pass down to your children and your children's children. I'm like, all right, that's something that I can go with. And it's real easy to think about the family aspect of a legacy. With me, again, wannabe journalist, I didn't have the chops that my dad did, my wife did, or many of you did. But again, that's an easy thing to do. My brother, it was actually flipped with my brother and my dad. My brother is the expert historian, one of the preeminent historians at the World War II Museum, what most people consider to be one of the better museums in the world, in the country. My dad was a wannabe historian. He wasn't good enough to be a real historian. So Jeremy took that route. Summer got into academia. He's blowing my dad's bachelor's degree out of the water, and is going to be the first doctor in the Collins family very soon. Well, Lucy, for the last number of years, as she's starting to see my wife's students and friends of ours who have kids going to college, I went to the University of Missouri. Wow, okay. That's great. Now, it's 5 years from now. I don't know where she's going to go, but you know where she's not saying she wants to go? She doesn't want to go to Syracuse. She doesn't want to go to Columbia University. She wants to go to the University of Missouri. There's Kate, and the bond that my dad and Kate had was something like nothing I ever expected as a father with a great daughter. Bond that I never expected. And she is carrying on and sharing that burden of a legacy with not just that bond, but with her initials and Kent's initials, and monogram are the same. There's Austin, who, let me tell you what, he's the only Collins heir remaining. So he carries the heavy burden of truly carrying on what most people consider to be a legacy of the Collins name. There's Edie. One thing that the siblings did not do was really proofread or look over what we were going to talk about. We wanted to be genuine. We didn't want to try and mix and match. So the music that everybody is talking about, Edie, music was important to Dad. He was in a band. You've seen the pictures of the video of him playing in a band when he was younger. The music, he was going to carry that with the music that they talked about. No Bananas Today, the Louis Prima song, I think, was one of their favorites. But again, that's easy. The legacy of family is easy to talk about. The legacy of surnames, of titles, that's easy to talk about. But for the people in this room, the legacy that was just important to him, it was never talked about his students as his. It was never his student. Occasionally, Lisa and I at the dinner table would hear a story about, I got him that job. Or, well, I'll tell you what, I can't even tell you the last time he said that. It was always ours. Every single time. She's one of ours. Or the network executive, he's one of ours. The concept of it being ours, not a J school grad, not a Mizzou Tiger, one of ours. That was important to him, a journalist, a true equal. He didn't consider you a student. After you left here, you were one of ours, not his, you were one of ours. That was something that he really wanted to push through his relationships that everybody has talked about today. One of ours. And that's an even bigger legacy than a legacy of blood or a family. It's deeper than a family bond. It is just because you don't share the name with him, what mattered to him is that you were a disciple like him, as we talked about from his religion, spreading the gospel of what he considered, most people consider to be the greatest journalism school in the world. So think about that the next time anybody mentions legacy. Surnames, titles, that's easy to think about. But he thought about it as a community. He thought about it as a true journalistic community of being one of ours. Because that's what he thought about with you. So think about that in your life, about what it means to be ours, whether it's journalism, whether it's family, whatever. Because that's what he thought about you. So again, thank you very much for coming. I know Stacy's going to wrap it up. Show of hands if you want, how many had office hours with Kent Collins at the Heidelberg? So we're going to honor his memory a little bit with potato skins with lots of celery. Well done, extra crispy.
Before we do that, first a few thank yous for some folks who haven't been out here, but worth mentioning. To Paul McNeil, thank you for the music. The news people here know that the producers do all the work and don't get any of the glory. But Rick Evers, alumnus, Kent's former students are everywhere, including at the True-Last School of Business. Dr. Lauren Gaten Brangarth is an assistant dean here, and she was our host here today, so thank you, Lauren. Rhonda Nichols in our journalism dean's office was crucial to help us with the venues and reservations and such, so thank you, Robin. And as I said before, we've been streaming here, so Matt McCabe and Avery Everett, current students at KOU, have been helping with that. And I'll say also about Matt, he was Kent's IT guy of late. We helped set up the printer and some other things. So, Matt makes house calls. I don't know about that. All right, so we have a few moments. If some of you want to testify from your seats about Kent, I just have a few rules that I know Kent would approve of. Imagine he's going to Tiger Chair what you say, so keep it short, use active voice, and make exceptions. So I can call on folks. The grandkids, maybe we're going to help take some mics. You guys feel like doing that or not? Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay, you look ready. All right, let's see a hand here. Meredith Amos. Kent would hate this. Everybody's right about the name thing. I have to be whispering names in this here.
I'm potential journalist. 100%. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a veterinarian. As I got closer to college, I got freaked out. I was supposed to be in school 8 more years. No. I went to college undecided, and then decided I was going to do public relations for sports teams. My sister was a current broadcast journalist here at NU. And as soon as I told her, she said, you have to move here. You have to go to the journalism school. So I was going to go through the advertising series. And so I moved. Then I met Stacy, and Stacy says, well, Rochelle is so good. You've got to be just as good as your sister. And he bugged me for 2 weeks to switch from the advertising over to broadcast. And my world opened up. I had in-laws at my house today, and I had to ditch them to come here. And when they asked me who I was going to a memorial service for, I said, there are 4 people who I can say were mentors for me in my journalism career. There's Greeley Kyle, there's Linda Kraxberger, there's Stacy Wolfel, and there's Kent Collins. Kent taught me everything about being a journalist. How serious to take it, how important of a job and a role it was. And I was still learning from him when I was in my 30s, and I moved back to Columbia, and I was still coming and sitting and listening to him speak from time to time. Kent Collins was always happy to see me. I feel lucky that he remembered my name, because he would say my name. So I'm grateful for that. Kent Collins is somebody who, when you guys, Justin, you're talking about legacy, I don't think there's a crevice in this world that your dad hasn't touched through somebody, somehow, some way. I didn't think I was going to be able to listen to you talk about him, actually. Kent was a person who inspired you and made you want to be such a damn good reporter. He just wanted you to be that way, and you wanted to be that way for him. So, we've lost a really good one, and I'm so proud to see all the smiles on everybody's faces and the stories that you've shared, because I've learned a little bit more about somebody who taught me so much. And to you kids, you grandkids, you are so lucky to have such a fabulous grandma.
Very short and sweet, thank you, Meredith. Real quickly, we often hear Kent saying, now that's sexy, right? We've all said that today. So when I landed a job as an investigative reporter in St. Louis, I remember Kent called me and he'd ask me what kind of stories I was working on, and I could hear Kent go, now that's sexy. And he warned me, he said, if you ever get sued, make sure during the deposition that you don't say, well, we thought it was a sexy story. I just want to say quickly to the Collins family, I loved your father. My wife, who is one of his former students, Katie, loved your father. Truly, there is not a newsroom around this country where people do not know the name Kent Collins. I will never forget the night I was working. I was actually a student back late 90s, early 2000 when I graduated. And I was over the science lab working. When you still had to print out assignments, remember that? And we started to hear news that Governor Mel Carnahan's plane had crashed. And so I knew I had to go out to KOMU that night. I was going to be at the TV station. Well, my roommate, Kirk, who was an engineering major, nothing to do with this crazy journalism world at all, drove me out there. We were in the science lab working together. He said, hey, do you think I can run to the KOMU and use the bathroom? I said, sure. So we walk in the side door, and Kent is there at 11 o'clock at night. He's running the assignments. Negus, and that's when I felt like I knew, I had made it, because Kent Collins knew my name. Negus, you're going to Jefferson City, get your gear, get down there. And he looks at my roommate, who he had never seen, James, says, and you're going with him. My roommate, Kirk, looks at him and says, I don't know who that guy is, but I'm going home. So, final thought about Kent. I would come down to Columbia about once a year and teach his class, essentially. And my good buddy Rob Yagman, who was one of the students at Kent, he'd come down like the following week and teach his class. And his brother mentioned he never had any notes. And that was the great thing about Kent, right? Because he would just wing it, and he could talk about anything and everything to everyone. And Rob said to me one day, he goes, Kent's a genius. He goes, he really doesn't have to teach, he just gets all of us to do it. So we all come down there and we happily share stories with him. But God, what a legacy, what a man. And I'm still in a quote from somebody that I saw on Facebook. And it's truly a true statement. You were not Kent's student for 4 years. You were his student for life. He would check in on me, he would call me, he would ask me, how's Miss Katie? How are your triplet boys? He'd always have questions. He remembered all of that. And it just, God, I can hear his booming voice, and I'm going to miss that man. Just a great, great person.
As well as one of Kent's students. I had the fortunate life to know Kent a little bit away from the University of Missouri, because I'm also from Columbia, and so I've known Justin since high school and known the family. And you talk so much, Dean Kirbius, about the School of Journalism being the church of journalism, and I felt like I had the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit with me through my career. Yes, and it was Stacy, it was Greeley, and it was Ken Collins, of course. Greeley would kick my ass. Stacy would give me another opportunity, but it was Kent who took care of my soul. He took care of my heart, and he really helped me get through journalism school. I don't know how I would have gotten through without him. But my favorite story about him is not in journalism, it's not in school, it's in life, and it's about Kent the man. And one night I got a call from my mother, who says to me, I'm at Columbia Regional Airport, I just got back, and no one's here to pick me up. I don't know where your aunt is, I can't get a hold of her. She says, but there is someone here. They say they know you. And I said, well, who is it? And she says, his name is Kent Collins. And I said, well, yeah, I know, he's okay. And she said, he refuses to leave. He refuses to leave my side. I was on the plane with Miss B, and he just said, there's no way. And I hear him in the background, I'm not going! I'm not going anywhere. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, Mom, you'll be okay. You can tell him he said he's not going. He said he's not leaving. And that man did not leave my mother until someone came for her. He did not leave her side. He stayed there with her, and that is the measure of a man. So that is my favorite story about him.
I was just going to share, I had reached out to Kent. This wasn't too terribly long ago, but I'm sure all of you had the same experience where, after your first few times at KOU, we pull you over and we're like, we've got to work on this voice. You got this cheerleader thing going on, no offense against any cheerleaders. You got to just calm down, you got to lower that voice. So I sent him a note because someone had mentioned, calm voice and, controlling your voice, and had given me a compliment. And so I reached out to him, and so I just was going to share, because I know all of you have received these kinds of notes from, but oh, my dear Angie, thank you for the funny and kind note. Most important is your sentence that journalism life has been good to me. Well, I suspect you've been good to journalism. Just something you would have said to all of us. You've had a fine career. He talks about raising a family. Wow, that's a lot of goodness. I wish you well, and I wish you would send one of those beautiful children to Mizzou. I was telling Stacy that, that was in 21, so about a year ago. And when I heard of his passing, I thought, oh gosh, I wish I had sent one more note. Just one more thank you. The professors here that we've had for the journalism school, they were such incredible mentors, Stacy, Kent, and what you did for our lives, it's immeasurable. And checking back on us, being our mentors, not just for those 4 years, but our entire lives and our careers, and you cared so much about us. Thank you for sharing your father, your grandfather with us. It's immeasurable. It means so much. And I didn't get to say that to him one more time. So I want to tell all of you and all the other professors who are here, who helped us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Stacy, as you know, you hired me, and a couple of years after you hired me, I got a new position. It was teaching sports class. So I had two bosses. The boss on campus was Kent, and we were the boss out at Channel 8. And Kent would constantly, when he would see me, he would say, Jim, I don't like sports very well. And I don't like sports class. I don't know why we're teaching it. But the thing is, every time anytime there's, you know, like after the end of the semester, they always rate you like one of their favorite, you know, teachers. And when these seniors come in to check out the place, they always write, I want to do sports journalism. So I can't get rid of you, but I sure wish I could. So Kent, we had a great relationship. And by the way, Kent, I just want to let you know, some guy named Pujols hit his 700th home run last night.
So this goes off of what Jim said. I was a sporto, and I was in Kent's class, and there's 3 things that I remember about Kent most vividly. And the first was when he said, is Reed teaching you anything? I think you're smarter than a sports guy. And then I turned down about 3 sports jobs, and I didn't get a lot of calls back, and I ended up going in the news, and Kent wrote me a note about a week later and said, I always knew you were smart. And then it was a couple years later, my dad had passed away from ALS, and if anyone knows Kermit Miller, I work at KRCG now, and Kermit calls me and goes, you have a note on your desk, and I know you're not going to be here for a couple weeks, but I think it's important. And I said, oh, okay, Kermit, and one of my coworkers brought me the note, and it was a handwritten note from Kent telling me how much that the journalism school was thinking about me and my mom, and how much it, you know, mourned my dad's loss with me, and that was very special to me. And then it was this April, pardon me, we were doing a little bit of recruiting, and I came with my news director, and at the very end, Kent looked at me in the eye after giving me a hard time all day and said, just know we're all really proud of you, and I'm proud of you. And that honestly meant the world to me, and I wrote in a post after he passed away that the thing that hurt my heart the most wasn't the fact that, you know, the people that knew him wouldn't know him anymore or be able to experience things with him anymore, but the future journalists at this school wouldn't get that love and care from him. So, thank you.
Okay, we have 2 mics available. Anybody else? Linda.
I'm going to say just one thing, and that is, like many of you, I think I had a very complicated relationship with Ken. He was not always an agreeable man, and he didn't always see eye to eye with a lot of his colleagues about a lot of things. But we always kept talking. And through the years, I'll be into it. And I know this is true for many of you too, that he was responsible for making the connection that got me every job I ever had in my career. So much so that my mother, who's 86, continues to ask until about 6 months ago, every so often, at some point in the conversation, she'd say, now how's Kent Collins? And when I told her that Kent was very, very ill, she was very sad, and she said, well, I know everyone there is going to miss him. So I just want you to know that my mother was thinking about you and Kate Collins.
Bring it on down here.
Well, I'm the other lesser brother. About a month or 2 before the end, Paul and I came to visit, and it was just the 3 of us in his office. And Kent said, I'm a lucky guy. He wasn't really, things weren't exactly right. He knew exactly what was going on. He told a few jokes. And just before we left, he said again, I'm a lucky guy. And that's Ken. And I knew he was a lucky guy when he said that, but coming here today and seeing all of you and seeing his wonderful family, I think he was even more right than I thought then. Thank you.
I'm Brent from Lervo. You know, one of the things that's I've been struck by as we've all been having these memories, and I'm in my late 40s, I feel like I was just here not that long ago, but I'm so jealous of so many of the people who came after, who they, you know, I've emailed and talked to Ken for years and years, but I don't have those texts. I wasn't a texter with Ken, and there's so many who have come after me who still have these great chains that they can look back on, and you know, I'll always have that voice in my head. But Justin, I wanted you to know, and I probably shared this on social media, but you were talking about hours. And I was news director at KRCG back in 2006. And I can't remember if this was the first time it had happened or if it had just been the first time in a long time. But when I got that job, it was, I think, Kent was very, very proud of the fact that for one point in time, there were Mizzou grads who were in that job in all three of the stations. And you know, it just remembers that he was one of ours, and one of ours are running the show in each of the stations, and I'll always
Chris Barnes is right there. It was the three of us.
So I wish it had been longer, but that's another story from another time. But the other thing I wanted to close with, I left TV, the linear side, back in March, and with Spectrum News in St. Louis now. This is not a plug, I promise. But we're a five-person team. Five-person team, and two of us learned at the Post lectures and just love of what we all do. And she couldn't be here with us, but it's remarkable that, you know, years after we've all passed through the temple, you know, the smallest newsroom in St. Louis is basically built by the legacy of Ken Collins. Thank you.
My name is Mike Jenner. I'm a faculty colleague at Kent's. I joined the faculty in 2010, about 12 years ago, after a long career in the newspaper business. And I didn't really know Kent or get to know him very well until after he retired. That's because in 2018, the journalism school restructured the faculty governance and grouping, and merged a lot of the faculty groups and newsrooms into one. So there no longer was a broadcast chair, there was no longer a print and digital chair, there was the journalism professions chair. So all the newsrooms and faculty were under one chair. And I was fortunate to be elected chair of the professions faculty, and so for the last 3.5 years, served in that role. I just recently left that role. So Kent was horrified or terrified that someone who didn't have a broadcast background would be working with the faculties. And so he made it his mission to make sure I understood and I respected and appreciated the great work that went on at KBIA and KMU, and understood what fantastic faculty we had, what fantastic staff we had, and what a treasure these newsrooms were. And he also had lots of ideas about what could be done to make life better in those newsrooms, to help the news directors to work with the faculty and staff. And so he began having lunch with me on a regular basis. And even during the pandemic, I remember one lunch out of the Bonnie View nature area near his home, sitting at a picnic table in a dust storm, eating Subway sandwiches. He would always come and a little piece of paper about this size. and it always had like 8 or 10 bullet points on it. And during our lunch, we'd get through maybe the first 2. And I finally got to the point where I have to go back to work, and I said, "Can't give me the list." And I looked it over, and if I needed to ask some questions about something, I would, but I knew what his priorities were. So, Kent was really clear, family was first with Kent, and, but, the J School, KOU, KVIA broadcast program was a close second, even ahead of the Cardinals. And Kent was a very proud man, but he was also very humble, and he bragged a lot, but he never bragged about himself. He was always bragging about his kids, or his grandkids, or his wife, or his students, the KOU, KVIA. If you proved yourself to him, and he believed in you, he became your champion. He built people up, and once he was your champion, then I'm not saying you could do no wrong, but he was in your corner. And I think that's one of the things that means the most to me, and one of the things I'll always remember about Kent is, he believed in people, and I always feel like he was my champion, and I think a lot of us in this room feel the same.
Well, I'm going to say the potato skins are getting cold. So why don't we take the stories there. You guys have been great with the mics. Michelle, do you need some interns, some pages and everything? Maybe we'll put them out there. All right, so Kent would have been horrified that we were all here to talk about him, but he would have loved seeing all of you together. So, Justin. Some say you're retrieving from